Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centred around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. I am here as ever with Tom and Francis. The whole gang's here today. How are you guys doing? How has your week been? Francis, we'll start with you since you weren't here last week.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling much better. Very happy to be back. Unfortunately, I had an illness that took just a bit of a while to recover from. Yeah, I felt like at the start of the week I felt it coming on, and then lo and behold, by the end of the week, ill. But no, feel much better now, and very excited to be chatting fintech with you guys again.
Amazing stuff. We're definitely glad you're feeling better. And Tom, how about you? How are you doing this week?
Very, very good. It's nice to have the whole gang back together again. I feel like every time we do it, we're like, wow, what a rarity. We finally got all three of us together at the same time. So it's always nice. And yeah, it's been a good week. Back to normal after May 2020. You kind of get back into the rush of the news. But no, it's been a good week. Lots of good news. And as Francis said, I'm excited to have a chat. How's your week been, Polly?
My week has been great. Thank you for asking, Tom. I don't often get asked when we do this podcast. I am okay, thank you. But no, it is funny how difficult it is to get three fintech journalists in a room to record a podcast together. But apparently it's harder than it looks. But anyway, we are here. We're ready to talk about fintech. Guys, what articles are you bringing with us this week? Tom, what are you going to talk about?
So this week, one of the big news stories that sort of piqued my interest was from the FCA, which announced that at the start of this week, it announced that it's going to be launching a supercharged AI sandbox.
Awesome stuff. And Francis, how about you?
This week I'm going to be talking about crypto scams and how much has been lost in the past year.
Cool stuff. My article is all about new research from checkout.com where merchants are at risk of losing consumer trust when it comes to digital ID. So let's kick off. Great week of fintech stories. Tom, I'm going to pick on you. You can go first.
Fantastic. So just to recap, on Monday this week, or the week we're recording, which was the 9th of June, the FCA basically revealed plans that it's going to try and help banks and fintechs experiment safely with AI to help drive innovation via a new AI sandbox. And basically it says that the news is going to enable firms to access NVIDIA's full stack accelerated computing platform to explore AI innovations. And the FCA basically hopes that this is going to support its strategy to drive economic growth by harnessing the technological advances like AI. Now, this launch comes in the face of around 80% of banks saying that sluggish innovation is hurting their business, fueling talent shortages, resource wastage, and eroding their competitive edge, according to a recent research study by core banking fintech Sascada. Now, obviously, these findings kind of suggest that the new Sandbox is going to fit a gap in the UK market quite nicely. It's going to try and support AI-based innovation, particularly as the UK is looking to make itself a global AI leader. And obviously there was a lot on that earlier in the year about how it's kind of driving to be the largest AI sort of region other than the US, basically. And a lot of the industry reaction we received to this news was obviously that it's really positive news to help drive this agenda forward. But we also kind of heard from different experts that some of them warned that it's important to retain the right balance between AI and a human touch. And also that some financial institutions that operate outside of these sandboxes might struggle to keep up, which could put pressure on them to engage in less secure forms of experimentation, which in turn would create more systemic risk. And with all that, I basically wanted to get your take on where you lie on this spectrum of how good this news is, and really just what your overall take is on the sandbox. Polly, I'll come to you first. What are you thinking about it?
I think, it's a really interesting thing, and I think it is good news. I think obviously AI is just flavor of the week, flavor of the month, flavor of the year, flavor of the whatever. Like AI is everywhere right now, and I think everyone's always looking. At least at the moment, everyone seems to just be really looking as to how they can really leverage AI in their offering and like use it for their development and their innovation. So I think on that hand, it's really great to see the FCA kind of reacting to sort of the trends that are happening and also the response from people in the industry wanting to explore opportunities for AI and, offering a way for companies to be able to do that sort of more safely and in a regulated environment. I think that's really brilliant, having that sort of sandbox to experiment with AI. And I think it could be really transformative for the industry, especially when we think of smaller players who, maybe they haven't been able to do as many experiments with AI for whatever reason, but to actually be able to join the sandbox and explore the potential of artificial intelligence in kind of a more supported environment, I think is great. My only sort of, not necessarily negative, because I don't think it is a negative, but more just a thing I would like people to be sort of aware of, thinking about, is using AI in situations where you don't really need to use AI. Like, I think it's great that you've got this sandbox going on. I think it's great that companies can come in, have a play around, figure out what's for them. What I don't want to see is these companies come in and just start shoving AI in everywhere that they possibly can, just to say that they've got AI. Like, I don't need you to AI enable everything. And I think that's that's something that I'm finding in sort of the world, not just in fintech. I think there's this desperate need from a lot of companies to just kind of prove that they're on trend and on track with everything that's going on, and so they're shouting about all these AI enabled things that are happening. And I don't really care if you've got like an AI. I can't even think of a good example, but like, just don't shove AI where it doesn't necessarily need to be. Use AI for what it's good at. Use AI for what it's made for, and bring that innovation and use that, and use the sandbox in that way in order to drive that innovation. But don't feel like you've got to take it on just to say that you can use artificial intelligence. I think, does that make sense? That's my only sort of caveat to this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something that, without trying to sound like I flexing again, that I was at Money 2020, it was something that we heard a lot there was obviously AI is such a big topic and everyone's talking about how it's going to transform the industry. But I think one of the things that we heard a lot more this year that we didn't hear last year was just how many people are basically saying we need to be really careful about how much we use AI. And I think everyone's so aware now that what we had last year was everyone saying, oh, we're using AI to do this, this, and this, and this. And people are being, or I say people, sort of financial institutions and fintechs are being a little bit more aware now of, okay, we don't need to say we're using it everywhere, because as you said, no one really cares. Like, it's not a differentiator because everyone's saying it. They're all saying, oh yeah, we're using AI in this way. And in a lot of cases it receives backlash. The one that comes to mind for some reason, like Duolingo, when they were like, oh, we're going to use more AI, they got huge backlash for it. And obviously there is still such a worry from the consumer space, and you can see why, that AI is going to take over everything, and we're going to lack that human touch, and actually things are going to be less catered to people because of AI rather than more catered to them. And obviously one of the benefits that people say AI is going to bring is more personalization, more usage of data. But I think there's a worry that everything's just going to be very streamlined. It's going to become very AI-ified, and that's what we're going to be left with. And we're not actually going to have anything too personalized, because everything's going to be streamlined so much by AI that everyone's going to have the same kind of offering, because that's the most efficient sort of offering. So yeah, I think it's a very good point, and it's something that we've heard a lot recently. And one of the contributors to the article said a very similar thing: is we have to make sure there's a balance between the human touch and not. But Francis, I'll bring you in. What's your take firstly on the sandbox, and do you agree on this kind of worry that there's going to be too much AI at some point?
Yeah, I mean, on the sandbox itself, I think it is on the surface like a really good thing. I think, especially as highlighted in the article, that 80% of firms say that sluggish innovation is a problem. I think creating the sandbox really addresses that and sort of invites people to go into an environment where innovation is not only encouraged, but, accelerated, and people are really told to try new things and see if it works. But yes, I think the idea of too much AI is definitely a real problem. And I think people need to try and see where AI can be used. And I think that is where a sandbox can be really, really helpful, is to sort of see, is it useful here? Is it needed here? Or is it just a way for us to say, we're using AI, which a couple of years ago was very sort of like forward thinking, whereas now, like you sort of said, it's just a bit like everyone's doing it. You're not special if you're using AI. If anything, sometimes people think that you're just taking sort of the easy route now by using the technology. Yeah, I mean, I think it is a really interesting point if, if it's almost a thing of like, all right, let's leave it for now and sort of see how it does and not give it as much love necessarily. I guess that's one way of looking at it. But to be honest, the thing that stuck out to me in the article came from Hack the Box, which was this point that firms outside of the regulated environment may play a risky catch-up game. And I think that's something that really didn't occur to me before, that it's true, organizations that don't have the ability to use the sandbox to try out these new services, they might try and do so in a sort of compromising way. So I think that is really another interesting sort of way to look at it is, if these services are, of course they can help, but by sort of offering a service to some but not to all, then I don't know, it's hard to explain. But yeah, overall I think Nikos Morales of Hack the Box, the point of, if the negative impact it could potentially have on the environment and, the public perception of AI, while it isn't, as we've sort of discussed, a lot of people are looking at it maybe a bit too much, it still can be very, very helpful. And it definitely doesn't need a potential negative response due to, poor testing. But yeah, no, I think it is a really interesting article.
Yeah, I completely agree with your point. I think it was one of the things, same for me, that you don't initially think of when you see the news. Think, oh, this is great. It's just going to enable more sort of regulatory oversight into this testing. It's going to enable them to access these NVIDIA products that they wouldn't have been able to previously. We're just going to speed up innovation. But you don't actually think about, not every single financial entity and fintech has access to that sandbox, is going to be able to use it at the same time. And I guess the question is whether they can broaden access to it in order to solve that problem. Otherwise, I guess there is that risk of there being a sort of small section of the industry that isn't going through the same oversight and are almost pressured into cutting corners to make sure that they can keep up with the firms that do have access to these cool new products and services. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. And I think there's a lot of AI conversations left in us, whether we like it or not, that are going to be coming in the future. I'm sure we'll have plenty more news, sort of announcements regarding AI that we'll be talking about and seeing how it evolves. And hopefully, like we said, it's not going to be a case of just taking over everything, and we are going to see a good balance, as in the financial industry and beyond, to try and keep that human touch. But I think with that, we'll wrap it up and we'll move over to one of your articles. I think, Polly, you're still talking about a UK-based story, so why don't we go with you?
So my article is all about some new research from checkout.com. They are a global digital payments platform, and they have essentially found that merchants are at risk of losing customer trust, with 43% of UK consumers are favouring digital ID, with many merchants and financial institutions not offering ID verification and biometric payment authorization. So I just thought this was really quite interesting, and basically, in this new report, Trust in the Digital Economy, Checkout.com has found that 49% of the UK population believe that the future of secure payments online will use digital ID as verification. And this is particularly interesting because the UK government are currently exploring plans to develop a digital Brit card ID card. So according to the new research conducted by YouGov, 43% of the consumers in the UK also believe that digital ID verification would enhance their trust in merchants and financial institutions when transacting online. But despite this demand, only 21% of UK consumers are currently using a payment method with biometric verification for added security. And I just thought this was a really interesting sort of little piece of research. Not little, that's the worst thing to say. I thought this was a really interesting piece of research, kind of, especially when we're talking, what we were just talking about with kind of like AI and things like that, and how everything is moving along, and the industry is kind of, we keep going up. But digital identification, I think, is something that we've been talking for a long time. And yeah, I don't necessarily think we've seen a huge boom of it, right? Like it's keeping going, and it's still developing, and it's still being implemented, but we haven't had this like crazy boom sort of trend of it, or it being implemented everywhere, kind of like how I was maybe expecting to see after some of the conversations that we've had over the past few years. Digital ID has been really sort of at the forefront of a lot of conversations when it comes to payments and how we move forward with the payments industry, and keeping people safe and things like that. And so I guess, we'll get your thoughts on it as well, but I think it's just very interesting to sort of see that there is, somewhat of a demand for digital ID, and in terms of kind of, integrating that within payments for regular consumers. And as we all know, customer loyalty and customer preferences are king when it comes to things like this. And with consumers getting really sort of savvy towards the risks that they're facing, scammers and online threats are coming at a mile a minute, especially when they're getting such big airtime in the news, with big companies falling victim to cyber attacks and things like that. Like the M&S one has only just sort of been resolved this week, with them now opening their online orders back up again. So I think scams and cyber threats are kind of really at the forefront of people's minds. So I thought it was interesting to see that there is a real appetite for digital ID verification. So what do you guys think? Do you think we are not as far along in the digital ID front as we should be? Is there still call for biometric authentication, or is it just another thing that's gonna happen and we'll get there? It's just maybe a bit slower. Francis, what do you think?
I think it's probably the last of those options, to be honest. I think it is something that is going to happen, but I think just based on how things have gone so far, I think we probably are going to be getting there a little bit slower than than other countries. But that's all right. But I think it's something that's really important that organizations do definitely need to prioritize, because while 21% may not seem like it isn't the majority by a long shot, it still is a considerable amount of consumers that are, that want to use biometric verification for added security when making payments. And I think because of that, I think the premise of the article is spot on, and it is this idea that, merchants and financial institutions are at risk if they don't sort of tailor to this demand from consumers. And I think it is something that we will see happen in time. I think it's not something that's going to sort of probably happen just overnight, but I do think that, the digital ID uptake in the UK will definitely happen. And yeah, so I think it makes sense that, organizations and merchants get ahead of the game and sort of prepare for that already. And for those that already want some sort of biometric verification, then that's all the better too. I think it's sort of almost two birds with one stone in that, when you look at it like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's, like with everything, things just continue to happen and keep ticking along, and that's not really much more to be said on it than that. But Tom, what do you think on the whole digital ID thing?
I think it's really interesting, because it's the kind of thing that, like, I personally have always been surprised. Like, it's not something that's been at the forefront. I think I've always thought, it'd actually be really handy just to have some form of digital ID on my phone, and I could see there being a real use for it, just in like ordinary day-to-day life. And obviously, in terms of making payments, buying things using your digital ID, it's just another form of authentication. So you can see why there's a lot of benefits to it. But it's something that I guess we hopefully will be seeing more of in the future, given that the UK government is looking into implementing sort of ID cards, obviously more tied to the sort of migration crisis that it says it's having, to kind of prove that you are and sort of an authorized person in the UK, say. But I think it's obviously going to be something that could stretch to have more uses than that. And from what I've read into it, this sort of so-called brick card would be linked to your different sort of government documents, and it have all kind of different information about you as a person. So I guess you could use it in a whole range of contexts, given that it would just be on your phone, presumably in your digital wallet or a government issued app. So I think there's definitely a reason to expect that there will be a more of a shift towards them. And I can definitely see the benefits for them. Obviously, I feel like it wasn't that long ago that I was walking around parts of London and people were like, "Oh, holding up placards protesting against any forms of digital money or digital ID," because there's obviously a bit of concern about how secure is having all of your information on your phone, having all of your money becoming digital. There's obviously some conspiracies about that, but also some very valid concerns about that as well. But I think we're kind of past the point now of okay, but we can't really cater to everyone with these physical cards. Digital ID is something that has been implemented in other countries really successfully. They've had it running for years and years, albeit not too many countries, but those that have seen real success with them. So I think there's definitely a room for more digital ID progression, and hopefully it's something that can happen quite quickly. Although, as we know with the UK government, it's not something that always moves particularly quickly. But it would be really interesting to see if it's something they try and push out before the next election, because I think it's the type of thing that would be very good politically. But yeah, I think personally I see a lot of value in it. And obviously there are always drawbacks with these kind of things in terms of access. Not everyone has a smartphone, so how does that work? But I think there's definitely room for it, and I think there's a lot of benefits and use cases that it would be really helpful for. So yeah, I'm in the camp that hopefully we're going to see it pretty soon, but not holding my breath.
That's a camp I think we find ourselves in quite a lot. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right when you say possibly for the next election. I think that is probably a really accurate timeline, I think. So I guess we'll see how it all goes. But anyway, moving on. Francis, why don't you take us away for the last one?
Yeah, sort of a completely different topic altogether. I sort of wanted to, or the article that sort of caught my eye this week was really in the world of crypto. And I feel like every year or so, we always see we definitely see them every year. We see these articles that sort of explore how much crypto fraud is really impacting the sector. And well, the latest research came from BitGet, and it found that global crypto scams losses surged to 4.6 billion in 2024, with deepfake technology and social engineering emerging as the dominant tactics behind high-value thefts. And I think this is something new that perhaps we weren't really seeing sort of in 2023 and before. And the findings come from the 2025 Anti-Scam Research Report in partnership with blockchain security firms Slowmist and Elliptic. And it also found that AI-powered scams have moved beyond phishing emails to include fake Zoom calls, synthetic videos of public figures, and Trojan-laced job offers. So BitGet identifies 3 primary scam categories as the leading causes of user loss: deepfake impersonation, social engineering schemes, and Ponzi-style projects cloaked in DeFi or NFT branding. The report outlines how stolen funds are funneled through the cross-chain bridges and before reaching mixers or exchanges, complicating enforcement and recovery efforts. And additional insights include case studies from major scam incidents in Hong Kong, the rising use of Telegram and X, or previously known as Twitter, comment sections as phishing entry points, and the continued growth of professionally run fraud rings operating across borders. So the report has been published during what BitGet has called Anti-Scam Month, an initiative dedicated to security education and ecosystem-wide awareness. But can these fraudsters be combated? And the article details how BitGet's anti-scam hub, its innovative detection systems, and a protection fund exceeding 500 million are being actively deployed to mitigate user risks. Furthermore, Slowmist offers detailed forensic insights into scam tactics ranging from address poisoning to job offer Trojans, while Elliptic examines the laundering patterns of stolen cryptocurrency through cross-chain bridges and mixer platforms. But the main thing I wanted to discuss with you guys today is does the level of crypto fraud come as a surprise? And do you think this time next year we can look back and say that strong initiatives were put into place now to sort of curb fraud? And do you think we'll actually see the numbers drop? Tom, I'll go to you first.
I think it's a really interesting topic, and I guess it kind of goes to show just how quickly things are moving with like deep fakes, especially becoming a real risk. And I thought the comment from the BitGet CEO Gracie Chen quite interesting. She said the biggest threat to crypto today isn't volatility, it's deception. And I think there's a real kind of shift in the industry in terms of everyone knows that crypto is volatile. They know what it's like, and there's actually a real risk now in terms of bad actors, fraudsters trying to get hold of crypto that in many cases aren't in very secure wallets. People forget their details, they forget their passwords, they can't gain access to it, and then other fraudsters are able to. And I think there's a lot of different schemes. As you said, there's so many different types of new tactics, fake Zoom calls, AI based job offers, things like that. It's really a new face of fraud that people have to consider. And I think really and truly that is only going to lead to more fraud successes, at least in the short term. I think people still aren't used to seeing these types of AI driven fraud cases. We're all used to phishing emails. We're used to seeing how, you can spot spelling mistakes in those. And obviously AI came in and everyone was like, oh, how's AI going to, impact that? Because everyone's going to be able, these fraudsters are going to fix all the spelling mistakes using AI to generate the emails. But actually what they've done is, instead of just sort of updating the phishing emails, they've moved on completely. And as you said, they've gone to these different types of Zoom calls. They've gone to new ways to imitate public figures. And it makes it a really dangerous space for people that even those that are technologically savvy, they are still very much kind of in the camp of at risk of falling for these. And I think every day that AI advances, it becomes even harder to differentiate what is AI and what isn't in some cases. And I think that's something that means that probably in this space, despite these new techniques that they're implementing to try and combat this, it's probably going to be a case of we're going to see more fraud rising before we see a fall in any real way to combat it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point, and I think you're 100% right in saying that every single day it is getting more sophisticated, and fraudsters are finding new ways to utilize AI in sort of malicious ways. And I think it's really easy to forget as well that the types of things or AI generated images that you see on Twitter, which are sort of like memes and funny and very obviously AI generated, because that's what's funny. But it's easy to forget that the technology can create really, really lifelike things, and that like you said, it's not even for those that aren't in the know. Even those in the know, it's becoming increasingly difficult to differentiate what is and isn't AI just with the human eye. And it goes to show that technology security providers, I should say, really need to up their game to ensure that they are keeping up to date with the latest sort of AI threats. Because, like you say, from going from emails or Twitter or X comments to fake Zoom calls, I think is a huge jump, and is something that is quite scary, to be honest, when you think about it. But Polly, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree with everything you guys have said. I think the accidental theme of the podcast today was AI, because with everything always just seems to come back to AI right now, and especially when it comes to scams and using AI for scams. I think it's quite a scary world out there. I think it's one of those things, isn't it, that how do you solve the problem of scams and all that sort of deceptions and things that month? And I guess does it come down to user awareness and education? Does it come back to education again? Probably. And I think it's really AI has made it so difficult to tell the difference between what's real and what isn't, even not in a scam, just in real, like you guys were saying about memes and stuff like that. And I think it's coming down to quite a scary landscape, I guess. And how do you kind of teach people to spot the difference? And I think that's a really difficult thing to do. So I guess I hope that there's going to be a lot more done to sort of combat fraudsters and highlight different ways to detect scams that aren't just necessarily consumers trying to spot something too good to be true, but actually, actual detection systems and all that sort of thing, especially when it comes to crypto. But, criminals and cyber criminals, they're just constantly evolving. And though the tech is constantly evolving to combat them as well, it always feels like that. It always feels like you're a tiny bit behind, even when you feel like you're ahead. In the industry, like as soon as we find a solution to solve one problem, then the fraudsters kind of come up with another thing and they're doing something else again, and it's always finding new ways to scam people and scale activities and things like that. But I'm confident that we've got the tech to do it, and especially harking back to your article, Tom, in terms of like the AI sandbox, I think it's things like that are going to hopefully help combat AI, AI to fight AI in a sort of a weird Inception type thing. But I think that's ultimately what's going to help. It's kind of seeing where we can actually do something, and hopefully there's a lot to be done. But yeah, I guess it's quite scary, really. Let's be honest, AI is terrifying.
Well, I think the other thing that I forgot to mention as well is that it is when you take sort of the unknown aspect that comes with crypto. I feel like a lot of people, it's these new cryptos. Everyone wants to get in early before they sort of take off to, get rich quick. And I think there is it's almost this pipe dream, I think, of like everyone wants to buy into the next Bitcoin before it becomes Bitcoin, essentially, and, becomes this like huge, like this $1 million or multi-million dollar even is humongous. And it's just like, I think people want to try and believe that they're smart enough to recognize, and I think that's what scammers are really sort of latching onto. And it's not to sort of victim blame and sort of say people, it's your fault for trying to be smarter than everyone else, but there has to be an awareness of it comes down to that, is it too good to be true? But I think because of the nature of crypto and that a lot of people or new people that look to buy into the space don't exactly know what the obvious sort of warning signs are. I think it's like you say, that is where education is needed again.
Absolutely. But anyway, that does bring us to the end of our discussion today. Thank you so much, guys, for bringing your articles. And if you want to hear anything more about anything we've talked about today on the podcast, then head on over to thefintechtimes.com, where there are plenty more news and insights over there. Super quickly, let's do what I learned this week. So each week we are learning so much new stuff, being on the editorial team at the Fintech Times, that we thought it'd be fun to share it with our listeners. So Tom, what have you learned this week?
So this week I learnt a new statistic from a new sub report, which is that health tech and fintech were the sectors in Asia Pacific most exposed to a new wave of AI-powered fraud, with health tech recording the sharpest year-on-year spike across industries in the region, an alarming 723% compared to Q1 2024.
AI again, it's always AI. Francis, what have you learned this week?
This week I learnt that for the first time in almost 30 years, Guernsey will have a locally licensed bank, as Bank Aston has received a banking license and been authorised to launch a new offshore bank by the Guernsey Financial Services Commission.
Excellent, very exciting. And I learned this week that the UK retail and hospitality businesses are using a whopping £1.6 billion a year to payment system outages, which is a lot. But anyway, guys, thank you so much again for joining me. It has been a pleasure to talk about fintech with you. And yeah, great to have the gang back together, and I'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys next week.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.